Hello everyone, happy holidays and welcome back to Writing 101. Today we are going to focus on world building, the 5 basics to be exact. This is a very hard skill to master, and although I did say that characters are hard to master in terms of crafting, they have tangible material to work with, i.e. human beings. The human mind is very complicated. Even if you're a simple person, you still have to consider everything that a human uses in terms of their decision making, how they live their life, if they have any mental illnesses, everything. The human mind is extremely complicated, and that's why it takes time to really understand character. But we're not going to focus on that today. Okay? We're going to focus on what is around them, their world. And not just their world, but the secondary characters and even the background people. And other things as well. So, the first one is environment. Okay? That is the character's surroundings or the setting. And if you don't know what setting is where does your story take place? Is it countryside? Is it in the city? Is it in space? I don't know. Maybe it's on an alien planet. That's where a lot of details come in. But put simply, environment is where the setting takes place. Now, does that change over time? Does it stay in the same place but the place evolves? We're going to cover that later, but that is the gist of what environment is. So, you have to start asking yourself questions. So, for example, if you're focusing on the main character's environment, you ask, where do they live? Do they live in the city? And if they live in the city, is it all apartments? Is it something that you pulled it directly from your own life? Is it completely fictional? All these things. Because your environment is not literally a spitting image of where you live. It can be anything you want. But that's why you have to ask yourself so many questions, because you don't really know how real you want this place to be. Because it's fictional. And even if you're a non-fiction writer, you still have to paint a picture for your reader. It's not just about the subject or the person you're talking about. You have to really exemplify not just who this person is, but how their environment affected them, and how can that environment connect with your reader. Because it's not just about giving information to your reader. It's about really creating this really rare painting. Do you understand? Even if you're writing nonfiction specifically of something that's known to readers, like Trump. There's a bazillion books now about frickin' Trump. But those books only sell because of popularity, at least to my understanding. But if you are writing something that's nonfiction, that's unique, then it's really important, even more important, to really emphasize how does that environment look around that subject. Because although that subject might be very interesting on its own, it's still not enough. You still have to ask yourself questions like, what exactly about this character am I trying to inform the audience on? What do they do? Where do they go? What kind of person are they? Because if it's like a celebrity that you're talking about, and you only know the surface of what is known to people, it's not enough. Okay, but let's focus on the fictional part. If you're writing fiction, you're asking even more questions, like, what is their current goal? And when I say current goal, I mean when you're writing that opening for your story, you're not just saying, here's this person. You're also saying, here's this person in this place, which will change over time due to whatever character arc you decide to give them. Let's say that nothing changes with the character. They're some drunk that didn't really make an effort in life, and they went through some trauma. That's why they drink. What kind of environment are they in? Are they in some like stingy apartment? You know, it's really gross and it really embodies who that person is. That's what environment is. It's not literally where the setting is. It's also the intimacy. Do you understand? The intimacy of where that character lives and how they live. So when I say the example of the drunk that stays at home all the time and drinks all the time, you have to show how does that place of living embody who this character is. You have to match it with their personality and their current state. And then, of course, you have to find a way to get them out. Because that would be really boring if you just had them sitting there drinking their ass off. No one wants to see that. Or at least they don't want to see just that. That's a good first impression to understand who this character is, but that's not everything. Okay? So, you also have to understand the purpose of having a character, the purpose of having a story. They have to go through something, so it doesn't mean that if the environment changes or evolves that they become a different person. They can stay the same person, but the environment around them has changed and will therefore make them at least self-aware of why they are the way they are. And that's how you use environment to really create change or at least movement. Okay? Let's move on to the next one. Society. This one, although... Let me get a little closer. There we go. This one, although small, it's still important because what goes on behind your character when they're doing something is it's not that it's super important, it has to have some kind of entertainment value. Even if it's just like a blur of noise. Let's say that your character lives in a very busy city area. The level and kind of noise that goes on around this person, like if they're living in New York and they're going through a busy street, you have to be asking yourself, okay, well, what kind of people are around this person? But are we picking up on what they're saying? Like, can we hear their conversation? Do we need to? What else is going on? Like, it's not just society. It's what is society doing? Are they just walking and talking? Are they driving and swearing and all this stuff? You know, because everyone has some kind of everyone has their thing. Do you understand? Like, even if your background characters aren't really doing anything in terms of having a purpose in the story, they're still doing something, and your character can react to that. So that's what society is. It's about how does your character react to what is in the background. Now, as for the foreground, society can have this ability to create a visceral reaction out of your main character. So what that means is, let's say your main character has an anger problem, and they're holding a cup of coffee while they're walking, and they're on the phone or something, or they're real like business type, and then some homeless person knocks their cup, and he gets super angry, starts having this huge reaction, and that you didn't see before, you weren't expecting it, neither was a homeless person, but maybe they don't really care, so they just mosey on over to the other side of where that person was walking, and then that's it. That's the only reaction we had for someone that went from the background to the foreground. It was a very small moment, but it still gave us this color that we didn't see before in the character. So keep that in mind when you're creating background characters and even secondary characters. Now let's say you have the opposite. Someone's living alone in a cabin, and like, how do you do that? How do you make this empty background feel full? Well, they could be hunting, okay? And let's say that you're just doing this. You just have them aiming their gun or rifle or whatever weapon they choose for hunting. And they're aiming at some innocent animal like a deer. Well, what if we change that? What if we flip it? Okay? What if they become the hunted? Like they're the ones pointing the trigger, pointing the gun, and then behind them we hear some growling. And it's a bear that says, well, I'm hungry too. Or a different animal, it doesn't matter. You have to create something that breaks the static in the scene. Because although people love a loner, it's not it's too static to have someone just sitting there minding their own business. If you want to start slow and just have that moment of them just doing something, great. But after you have that moment, you have to do something that breaks the monotony of the first initial environment you created for the story, and of course for the character. So you could have, the flip, like I said, of them becoming the hunted, or some innocent bystanders happen to fall upon this cabin, and this person doesn't like strangers, or maybe this stranger is someone that's related to this hunter or loner. They don't even have to be a hunter. They can just be someone that decides to live their life alone. So that's something to focus on when you're creating society, or how busy you want the background to be. You could have the natural environment be alive. Do you understand? That's where you go from taking something from your life, like a natural environment, and then taking that natural environment and making it magical. So let's say that this person has been living in a cabin for a long time, but never really explored it. Well, maybe something happens, like maybe they discover something in their apartment, or something fantastical comes to that environment and changes everything. Okay, you see, you gotta play with these things. Which leads me to number 3, structure. So I already kind of mentioned structure, where you take your environment or your setting and you try to really understand it. So let's start with, what is structure? So, put simply, it's the layout of your environment. So let's say you're writing a Stephen King-esque novel, and it takes place in an urban town. Well, that's where you get to decide, how do you showcase what this town is and what it looks like, the people in it, how many neighborhoods there are. Maybe it's just one little cul-de-sac and they're in this weird sort of like pocket dimension that's separate from the world. I don't know. It depends on your style and your taste and your goal for the story, but you have to understand the structure of your environment. So let's say your goal for the story, if it is a Stephen King-esque novel, a dark entity comes into town and starts messing with people. Well, we probably will only be introduced to a couple key characters at the beginning, and only have a small, intimate area of that town that we are being presented to. Well, it can't just stay there, it has to go somewhere. So that's where you really think about the characters and their decision making. How are they going to react to something, whether it's a monster or even just a person? Like what if their way of interacting with people that they know, whether they treat them positively or negatively, are they going to change? Like maybe you're starting with their breaking point and they decide to act differently. So that's something to consider, is how do you present your environment? How do you present the structure of your environment to the reader? and even to the character who has never really explored everything in their own immediate surroundings. And then, like I mentioned before, choosing natural or artificial environment. Natural being in a countryside, artificial meaning very structured, very compact, like Vancouver, BC, or like I said, New York City. If you have any other examples, let me know. But that's what's important about structure, is understanding what is key. How does this help match what I'm trying to do here? It's not just a story, it's where does it take place, how does it look, and is this my structure, or is this a structure that I already know in real life, and how can I make that my own? Okay? So, whatever you do, whether it's fiction or not, really understand, how does my structure help my character move along in the story? And how do I change it? Speaking of change, number 4, evolution. So, evolution is setting change. Setting change meaning, as a story goes along, how do you make sure that the setting goes along with the character's change? If you've seen the movie, what's it called? The Game? That Michael Douglas movie? It's one of the greatest cinematic pieces to my mind. I actually had to watch it for a film class a long time ago. Anyway, the cinematography and the change in your environment can really pair well with your character's change and progression in their character arc. So what that means is, even if they're in a small place, that place can really change. Okay? So, let's say you're in an urban town still. How do you take something so simple and make it change? Well, it's not about the size of the place, it's how each part changes. What do you want your character to do? How do you want them to react to certain things? And does your character change? The environment can change around your character, but they might not be, as compliant as you want them to be. It's not about making your character change with the evolution of your setting. It's more like giving them the option to change with moving parts, is what I'm trying to say here. Moving parts of the environment. Okay? Let's say the opposite. Let's say they're in a really busy area where there's no real chance to have a meditative change. Okay? Now there's just chaos all around them, even in their static state. How do you use that chaos to make them go from static to more fluid, even amongst the chaos and drama? You can use that to make them get out of their comfort zone and explore those moving parts, and see how they can become self-aware or change. So, up to you. Lastly, connection. Probably the most important and most difficult thing to master. And when I say connection, I mean, how does the world you created connect with your character? Because this is where a lot of authors, whether they're new or not, tend to fail. Is that they created this great and rich tapestry for the character to use, but it feels like it's just that. It's just a nice painting, a great one. But then it doesn't connect with your character. The whole point of world building is to incorporate it into your character's arc. It's not about just creating something awesome. Like, take Harry Potter, for example. That franchise, really is a franchise, is popular not because the world is magical, but because the magic in that world, whether it's dark or light, really tied well with the characters. It didn't just play to them, it played with them. And that is really important to make a distinction about, is the difference between with and against. Okay? Or sorry, with or at. With the character is what you want. Because how Harry changed as a person, even only into his teens, we really saw a change in him, because even though he stayed himself, his wholesome self, he did change in terms of the level of courage and his connection, not just to who shall not be named, but how he took that level of danger and still put himself in danger to protect others. And we really saw how the change in that environment connected with him. Because even though he made decisions that only he would make, he still had to grow as a person because of those changes. It wasn't because he felt a need to. It was just natural. It was just this natural progression that he had to really be kind of forced into. Because whether he liked it or not, he was connected to this darkness that would never leave him until he, well, sacrificed himself. And sometimes having your characters sacrifice themselves because of what they went through can really show the power of how connected that character is to their environment, to the world that they are in, and how much that world can really ask of a character. Because he could have folded. He could have been scared shitless and not make any kind of action. He would have, stayed static, but he knew he couldn't, because he saw how the environment was changing and how important it was for him to really, protect the ones that he loves, because he never really had a home that felt safe and normal. The only home that made sense to him was Hogwarts. And of course the people in it. I don't know why I'm kind of shooken up, but I think it's because I know how important it is to have emotion in your story. Whether it's like, it's not just your characters that have to feel something. It's not just them that have feelings. The world does too. Okay? You have to really treat the world like it's a living and breathing thing. It's not just some inanimate thing that can change, climate around them. Or, do you see where I'm going with this? The connection that your character has with the environment is so powerful, because it can really damage them, or it can make them really sing their character arc and really how it closes. And like, for example, with me, with my book 4 of Boone and Jack, I'm struggling with it now, because I feel like the world that I created, this new town, Citrus, is disconnected from them. Because I feel disconnected from my characters. Because the world that I created around them, it could be so powerful. It could really connect with the characters and make them really change for the better. But I need to make sure, as someone who's teaching you right now, that I'm not a hypocrite. That I'm really going to take the time to master that connection. Because even though I feel that I have a good grasp on world building, if I know that I'm becoming static in my writing and there's this huge disconnect between me and the characters, that means that the world that I created is not matching properly with where the characters are and where I want them to go. So that's what you need to take your time with. All the first, let me put these up for you again. Okay. These here, environment. Sorry, it's all mixed up. Let me just rearrange that. No cuts here. All real. All mistakes in. Okay. Environment. Society. Structure. And evolution. All of those things, as important as they are to understand, what really takes time to understand and master properly is connection. Because, again, your character is the one that lives in that environment, in that world. And even if you go crazy and you decide to take them from environment to environment, it doesn't matter. What matters is, how does your character react to these changes, to these other worlds that you want them to jump to? I wouldn't do that personally. That's very distracting as a reader to have the environments change so drastically all the time. But if that's the kind of person you are, that's the kind of writer you are, so be it. But be consistent about it. Don't just be chaotic about it. Be structured about it. Because each environment you introduce your character to has to have a clear image in the reader's head. And to yours as well. It can't just be some new change just because you got bored or something, or you want it to keep moving. You can keep a story moving in the same place. That's what I'm trying to get to, is the connection between the world and your character does not have to be insane. Okay? It can be calm and then slowly become more interesting. That's the purpose of connection. Is how do you take this beginning and make it go like this? 1, 2, 3, 4, or up, down, climax, swoosh. Okay? I'll leave you with an exercise. Let's do this. You will take one sentence, whichever one you want. It can be very basic, and you basically are going to have to change the narrative voice, meaning more or less detail. So let's say the sentence is, Jamie went to the store. Okay, where are they? Are they in a city, or are they in the countryside? Are they by themselves? Because if they are by themselves, then you wouldn't say Jamie went to the store. You would say Jamie went into the forest to get some berries or something. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to say here, is you use that opportunity to take person, action, location, and then try to create an environment from that. And then you can change how you present those details. Maybe you don't start with a person. Maybe you reverse it. Maybe you say, the deer approached carefully John's cabin, but John was watching. See how I flipped that there? I started with the animal and not the human. So you can have fun with that, and we will discuss narrative voice next time. But in the meantime, stay safe, happy holidays, and happy reading. Bye-bye.